So it's 2 o'clock in the Netherlands, 8 a.m. here in New York. I think people will continue to join. This is an open Zoom meeting, so we will see people joining the conference. But since we're at the Dutch conference, I think we should just get started in line with our culture of punctuality. So welcome everyone. Welcome to this session. Welcome to the Knowledge Platform on Security and Rule of Law Annual Conference 2021. Some of you may be in the venue, but I assume that almost everyone will be joining this from different places around the world. And it's always great to be here and to hear all the different perspectives. I hope you've been able to navigate the beautiful platform that the Knowledge Platform has, online platform for the conference that the Knowledge Platform has set up, and enjoy some of the sessions. We're very happy that you've joined us for this session on leveraging data to address asymmetries in access to justice. Now you'll all have seen that the theme of the conference is asymmetries in power, and we'll be speaking in this session on the relationship with the justice sector, asymmetries in the justice sector, and the role of justice data in addressing those asymmetries. My name is Maaike de Lange. I am the program lead for Justice for All with the Pathfinders for Peaceful, Just and Inclusive Societies, and we have a very impressive panel with us here today. I will introduce the panel speakers as we get to them, but we'll start with an introduction by Mariette Schuurman, Director for for Stabilization and Humanitarian Aid at the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But maybe before we listen to her introductory remarks, let me just say a few words on those themes and allow a few more people to join as well. So asymmetries of power, as I said, is this theme of this conference, and I think it's a very, very relevant theme. Asymmetries of power are real. And they are increasing. We've all heard this in the context of the pandemic. Inequalities, exclusion is increasing. Inequalities are growing, and inequalities in resources, in opportunities, and in power are becoming a dominant, are a dominant feature of our society, but are also a dominant topic for discussion and analysis of people who are trying to work together to make the world a better place. And asymmetries of power are both a cause and an effect of access to justice. They are a cause of unequal access to justice. They are a cause of unequal access to justice because almost everywhere in the world, people who have more power, resources, abilities are better able to use the justice system to resolve their problems or to resolve the problems in other ways. And they are also an effect of unequal access to justice because, of course, if the rules only apply to some and not to others, that just increases the exclusions. And there's quite a big contrast, obviously, with both the norms and the goals of the justice sector. Almost every legal system says the law applies equally to everyone. Everyone is equal before the law. We all know this. We also all know that the reality is very far from that. And many of you may know that SDG 16, of course, has set as a goal for the world to provide equal access to justice for all. A very ambitious goal that we have been working towards with an impressive group of partners in this movement for people-centered justice that we are working in. As I said, it's not the reality. So equal access to justice is not the reality that we see today. In fact, and many of you will have heard this number, 2/3 of the world population do not have meaningful access to justice. Now, in individual cases, it may be difficult because to see if something to pinpoint specific injustices and inequalities. But when we look at the data, when we take a broader perspective on the justice system, we collect that data systematically. It will help us see the patterns and address those issues. Now, as I said, we've been working with this movement for people-centered justice to really change the thinking about access to justice and move it from thinking about access to the formal justice system to access to the ability of people to resolve their justice problems. We've estimated the global justice gap to be 5.1 billion people who do not have meaningful access to justice, and that is a very important number for global advocacy. Many of you will have heard it in conferences. So that's at the high level, it's important. But we're here today to listen really to national examples, because it's even more important to understand justice, access to justice, inequalities at the local and the national level. So I'm very happy that we will be hearing from experiences in South Africa, Colombia, and Sierra Leone about collecting access to the people-centered justice data, which is critical to, if we want to work together to transform justice systems. Now, that just as a few opening remarks to really connect what we'll be discussing in the next hour or so to the theme of the conference. And without much further ado, I would like to welcome Mariette Schuurman. We're very happy to have her here. As I said, she's the Director for Stabilization and Humanitarian Aid at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to share with us her opening keynote. The floor is yours, Mariette.
Thank you, Micah, and thank you to the Pathfinders for Peaceful, Just and Inclusive Societies for organizing this session. And I think access to justice for always really has been a core part of our policies. And as you said, Micah, addressing asymmetries in access to justice is critical to achieve that. So as you mentioned, even before the COVID pandemic, already 1.5 billion people didn't see their justice needs, their justice problems resolved by the justice system. And COVID has only increased the demands. The number of disputes have been steadily increasing, issues around employment, about land or domestic violence. We know that women have been particularly hard hit, both in terms of lack of reduction of economic opportunities, but also increase in domestic violence. And that mobility restrictions increased women's vulnerability to abuse. In 12 countries surveyed by the UN, violence against women increased by 83% in 2020. So whilst the needs have only, and the justice gap has only grown, the justice systems have suffered. And Hill had a survey amongst 270 justice leaders worldwide that demonstrated that 53% of the justice institutions were mostly closed and only 4% could continue to operate. So the backlog in the formal justice systems had only increased, leaving many disputes unresolved. So for some countries, as I also said in my own opening remarks, particularly the rich countries, they started their recovery already, but worldwide, we see that the social and political impact is far-reaching and likely to manifest over a generation or more. We also see a trend of increasing inequality within societies and within countries, the richest versus the poorest. And that is obviously leading to further stress and threatening to reverse decades of advancement in poverty reduction and development. And as the Pandora Papers leak exposed, powerful people can exploit the legal loopholes to protect their wealth. And the poor, however, are at risk of losing houses, land, or jobs. They risk to fall into debt traps because they're unable to effectively use the justice systems to protect their rights. These issues have to be addressed worldwide, even in our own countries, but let alone in those countries where people are left furthest behind. So the report from the Task Force on Justice of 2019 highlighted that the most vulnerable groups, like women, children, and IDPs, are the hardest hit to access the justice system and exercise their rights. And that impacts societies as a whole. The OECD estimated that countries lose between 0.5 and 3% of their GDP due to the costs of absence of possibilities to resolve justice problems. And as described in the Pathways for Peace report, the exclusion that results from inequality should be addressed before it becomes violent. Failure to do so may result in pent-up frustrations reaching a tipping point of protest or instability. And actually, we are seeing that worldwide under our watch. So it's imperative for governments to address asymmetries in access to justice and to develop post-COVID recovery strategies that reinvigorate the resilience of people, and particularly those furthest left behind, and the resilience of society as a whole. And the justice sector plays a key role in that regard. If justice institutions aggravate rather than alleviate social tensions, the social contract will come apart. Conversely, if justice actors are seen to be defenders of fairness and inclusiveness, they can help build trust and give societies the cohesion needed for peaceful and prosperous recoveries. So there is an opportunity to curb asymmetric power through putting people at the center of justice systems. And we should use research and data on justice needs and journeys. And we should be inclusive, involve women, young people, as well as community elders to design solutions. Problems and solutions may differ greatly from place to place. Research from Hale again showed that in Tunisia, employment-related disputes are among the most prevalent legal problems, whereas in Mali, people have most disputes around land. And crime, mostly theft and assault, is the most common, most serious legal problem for refugees in Ethiopia. So once we know that, we can start to address these specific problems, context specific. In addition, we need to think of new solutions and answers, like in Uganda and in Kenya, where advice to 12,000 prisoners through legal clinics resulted in 5,000 prisoners not only representing themselves, but many of them even obtaining release. We've seen good examples of innovation that emerged during the pandemic, like solving cases online or over the phone instead of in court. Justice needs to be brought close to the people, identify and strengthen local mechanisms for conflict mitigation that enjoy legitimacy in communities, explore ways to use alternative dispute resolution and innovation, like in Somalia, where ITLO supports changes in tradition justice practices by involving women so that their interests are better protected. Pluralism and a systemic approach are important to addressing the scope of the problem. Informal justice may play an important role, even in the Netherlands, where only 4% of legal problems is actually addressed in courts. So we need to be aware of this and investigate the justice journeys that people undertake. Finally, the power gap can also be addressed by supporting the critical voice of civil society, so that also the perspectives of the marginalized groups can be heard and taken into account. Much of this is already incorporated in our approach to access to justice, for example, by facilitating dialogue between government and civil society. So as I said, in the Netherlands, we have put justice as a clear priority. And to this end, we convened a ministerial meeting in April to launch a Justice Action Coalition with the G7+ and the elders. So this meeting was encouraging because never before did we hear so many different ministers endorse the concept of people-centered justice that you also mentioned, Maaike, and speak to the urgency of finding solutions to the justice challenges exacerbated by the pandemic. The meeting addressed a letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations, urging him to include people-centered justice in his vision on the future of global cooperation and multilateralism for the coming 25 years. And we were very happy to see that in his common agenda, which was launched last September, just a month ago, the Secretary General announces the promotion of a new vision on the rule of law in support of efforts to put people at the center of justice systems. And the other important outcome of the ministerial meeting was the commitment to join the Justice Action Coalition, so a platform of collaboration to continue to translate ideas into action. So the Justice Action Coalition is a follow-up to the Task Force on Justice, which was co-chaired by Argentina, the Netherlands, and Sierra Leone, and we remain strongly committed and engaged in the Justice Action Coalition and look forward to our collective efforts. So together we will promote people-centered justice and speak up for access to justice in the global debates. We will promote political and financial support for equal access to justice for all, and join forces to influence international strategies and priorities. So the coalition will focus on data and exchanging experience of what works, in particular for groups that may risk falling behind in the SDG agenda. So today's panel, again, is, as you said, a discussion with data perspectives from diverse settings, such as South Africa, Sierra Leone, and Colombia. And it's very timely because it will provide country experiences on how people-centered justice can be used to address asymmetries in justice. And we need these examples to show how we can close the justice gap and build just and inclusive peace and peaceful futures. As the challenges have increased, there's also more need to exchange, to learn, and to work together. So we're very happy that this session will contribute to that and allow us to have a frank and open exchange of what works and what more can be done to address the justice gap. Thank you, Maaike.
Thank you so much, Mariette. Thank you for that introduction and those consideration, and thank you to you and to the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs for their continued leadership in this field. As you mentioned, both as a co-chair of the Task Force on Justice, and now in really working with other countries in the Justice Action Coalition. And you mentioned the meeting in April and the joint letter, which has indeed been effective here in New York in the context of the UN, with the Secretary General embracing this idea that the UN and the world as a whole needs a new vision for the rule of law, needs to rethink how the rule of law operates in our countries, how the UN supports it, and how we all work together to achieve it. And I think that is very important. Also because he mentioned that new vision for the rule of law should be built on SDG 16, which has been the inspiration, of course, for so much of our work together. So thank you so much, Mariette. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for these introductory remarks. With that, we will move to the next part of this session, which is really hearing from three very, very different countries. Well, all countries are different, but we're very happy to have with us three speakers. We have Jackie Nachtegaal from South Africa. We have Daniel Gomez Gaviria from Colombia, and we have Shahid Korji from Sierra Leone. And they will share with us their experiences with different types and shapes of justice data and how that really works in their context to address asymmetries, to analyze people's justice problems, and to help transform the justice sector. The first speaker will be Jackie Nachtegaal, who is CEO of Law for All. She will share with us her experiences from South Africa. Before I give her the floor, I just wanted to warn you all that there will be a poll coming up to gather some of your inputs. This will not be right now, but at some point during Jackie's presentation, you will see a poll pop up. Jackie will just continue her presentation, so we'll be asking you to multitask a little bit, which I think we're all used to in this day of Zoom. So please just answer the questions, reflect a little bit from what you've heard, and then we'll get back to the answers towards the end. With that, Jackie, it's my pleasure to give you the floor. I look forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Maaike. Let me share my screen so that you can see. Right, I think that was a beautiful introduction by Mariette as well to really frame exactly what we are here to talk about. And the interesting part is then the different approaches that we are going to take. So from my perspective, what I'm going to share with you today is it's a more unique methodology that I used, where I used poetry to explore the asymmetries in the justice system. As we stand, I mean, the data on the justice system has increased tremendously over the last few years. But when I looked at the South African experience, the justice surveys that have been conducted in South Africa had very conflicting results, and it still didn't give us a deeper understanding of what the asymmetries in South Africa really is. So I decided to use a tool called a causal layered analysis. That it's a foresight tool, which was designed by Sohail Inayatullah. So it allows for the articulation of constitutive discourses through various levels of inquiry. So it goes beyond the conventional framing of issues, and it kind of aims to unpack the ideologies, and it offers a deeper way of delving into a problem. In South Africa, the justice gap is tremendous. So to understand it, I wanted to use this approach, which has never been used to study a justice or the justice problem. And I was quite surprised by the findings. I'm going to just quickly frame the tool so that you have an idea of how it works. And then I will explain what the poetry part showed us in South Africa. So when you do a causal layered analysis, the first part is you delve into the litany level, which is usually, it highlights the noticeable aspects within the specific domain of research. Little analysis or understanding takes place. It's surface phenomena, and it kind of remains unquestioned. This was the problem in South Africa on the data, on the justice data that was present. It didn't really give us much more information on deeper structural problems. The second level of the causal layered analysis is the systemic layer, which concerns itself with interpreting the quantitative data, and it pursues structural explanations. Then you move into a third level, which is called the worldview level. Now, this is where I spent most of the time on the poetry, which I'm going to share now. In this layer, understanding deepens as the... Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. I only see the starting slide now. Somebody else is also. We're not seeing your presentation very well. So we see at least I see a starting slide, but not as you move through it. So maybe you need to unshare and then reshare.
Unshare and start again. That is okay. Let me try that.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that is fine. Technology, as you say. Can you still see my screen now?
I see your full screen. Yeah. Also
sorry for that. Let's try from here. Can you now see it?
I see part of a slide, but there's no text on it.
This is so weird because it worked just earlier on. Let me stop the share and start again.
Okay.
Apologies for that. It worked in our test.
Green room.
I do apologize.
No worries. This is with all the blessings of technology, and I like to think that it's still a miracle that we're here from so many countries of the world listening and talking to each other. But yes, these things do happen.
Okay, let's try that again. Share screen. Tell me if you can see this now. 3, the worldview level.
It seems to go to a frozen screen the moment you go to present. I know we shared presentations for backup with the tech support. Can we ask Aisha to go through it, or is that?
Yes, Jackie, could you,
yes.
Or Temba, could you share the PowerPoint with me so I can share it?
Temba doesn't have it.
Or if you go through it like this, Jackie, I do see it. If you just go to present mode, maybe that's better.
So this you can't see?
No.
No, I cannot see.
Frozen screen. But if you...
That is so strange. But this you can see.
Yes.
If you have it without present mode and then just run through it there.
I apologize. Okay.
But now...
all right, so you can see this.
No, it's hopefully now it's stuck in present mode, but I do see the slide 3, but I don't know if it's going to work if you click next. So maybe just if you go to the, there, I think we can see it. Oh,
Okay, are you on the 4th level?
it's gone again. Sorry, I think you have to unshare and then reshare. And then keep it open without going to present mode.
This is the strangest. Okay.
Yeah, at least for me, it works.
Yes, we can see it like this, Jackie. So just keep it in this mode.
Yeah.
Okay. So apologies for that. I didn't work when we tested it a moment ago. So we were going through the levels of the causal-aid analysis to just quickly frame how we got to the poetry. And in this 3rd level is usually where you delve into a deeper level of understanding. These are the worldviews which kind of legitimize a particular problem. Aspects like cultural perspectives, the role of family values, the moral code of society, and the architecture of social welfare are explored. In the last layer, that becomes a space of metaphors that dive into the collective archetypes and unconscious. So this layer illuminates the responses to worldviews under inquiry. It occupies itself more with the heart than the mind. Now, why I use this approach to studying justice in South Africa is really because it allows us to contextualize the data with more meaning. You know, we analyze it through the various historical structures, and the power of knowledge is added to it. I believe this is a very people-centered approach because the voice of the nation really becomes evident through this. And it's not just a superficial voice, it really is the things that shape intergenerationally. So from there,
I think people are still not seeing your slides, so maybe you can unshare, and maybe you can just quickly run us through those layers that you said and then continue. We'll have to take a little bit more time, but otherwise people don't understand what you're sharing with us.
Okay, so what do you want me to do?
Just quickly explain those layers without the slides that you showed, and then keep going where you were.
And the share is not, I'm not sharing now, right?
No,
so
don't share, because it doesn't seem to be working. We're just going to give up on that.
Okay, I'm going to have to try once more because what I really want to do is show the poetry. Otherwise, Themba will share the link and people can watch it afterwards. So through these layers, we kind of delve into, as I explained, layer 1, 2, 3, and 4. In layer 3 is where we get to the worldview layer. Now, this is where we delve into the archetypes and the worldviews that shape how we interact with one another, how we interact with the system, and also, very importantly, in a country like South Africa, the intergenerational approach to law, which was illuminated. So what I did is I used poetry because, in my mind, poets kind of act like the barometer for society. They articulate the way that we feel. And by using art in a data study, we're also able to share our findings to a greater audience than normal data and justice reports that go to very limited audiences. So through poetry, I got 114 submissions. I then thematically coded these, all these poems, and they indicate a far greater justice challenge than the mere legal process. They are the stories we tell ourselves and others, and it's the narratives that we pass down that shape that intergenerational interaction with the laws. And they are the ideas that influence how, why, and when we interact with the law. So it's a pity I can't show you this because can I try once more, Micah, or is it very frustrating?
I'm not sure it's going to work, quite frankly. I know it worked before, but I think why don't we share the link and then allow people to look at it after the session?
Okay, perfect. Because what I did is through all the poems, I got quite a few themes, which were then coded into 3 separate themes, which were asymmetry as a core theme, the rule of law as a secondary theme, and very interestingly, hope emerged as a 3rd theme. Now, from mapping the interconnections of these themes, the complexity and the dynamic nature of justice and access to it really became clear. And as a result, the demarcation and the definition of access to justice as two separate constructs becomes blurred. You know, justice cannot be sanitized or contained to formal process. It bleeds into all aspects of our life, from the absent fathers, lack of proper educations, the remnants of apartheid, the plague of corruption and crime. All of these themes shape how and when we ask for, approach the law, and how we interact for it, where we look for recourse, and how we enforce our rights. So, as I said, one of the biggest themes was the asymmetry, and that really lied at the heart of these narratives. There's a yearning for equality in South Africa, and the stories speak of the asymmetries in accessing law, but also in the inequality of education, housing, recourse, and protection of crime. So this becomes the most powerful aspect in personal identity, you know, especially in South Africa, a country which is marred by tangible, visible inequality. We've got townships versus suburbs. We've got cars versus public taxis. We've got private health care versus poor clinics. We've got education versus private schools. It's reinforced at all the touch points in South Africa. So inequality is further reinforced by our political past, the colonial histories and the oppressive regimes. These paradigms have seeped so deeply into the soul of our nation. And although the political system has changed, the notion remains entrenched in the areas that we live and in the schools that we attend and in the legal protection that we access. From there, the second theme that emerged through the poems was definitely the rule of law. And that's a very apparent concept of justice, law, and the access to it. The prevalence of crime and corruption as indicators for the rule of law. So the experience of justice in South Africa isn't only the ability to assert our own civil rights, but it's also the functioning of a criminal justice system. So as crime soars, the notion of a just state deteriorates. Our social dues are no longer delivered. So the poems really highlighted the obstruction to development theory. You know, when we take away the pursuits of truth, beauty, choice, and freedom from people, we obstruct the bounty of the benefit society is built on, and that which upholds the rule of law. And then when these deteriorate, corruption and criminality breed, which is the case in South Africa. But lastly, and I think that is a very powerful thing that we would come across in many nations, there's still a narrative of hope. There's still this clear call for something beautiful. There's still a belief that change can happen. You know, hope remains alive throughout the pain. It's much like the myth of Pandora. You know, once she opened her jars and all the evils and all the terrible things of the world escaped, the last thing that remained was hope. And it's evident that there remains this shared vision in South Africa across a very heterogeneous society, and it still hungers for a future with justice at its core. So, Temba, perhaps you can just share the link to the film, because what I did out of these poems, I chose you know, the ones that really resonated with these themes. And I put it into a short film so that we can share a wider audience to interact with the justice system, that we can move away from, you know, this functions like we have today that are so powerful, because this is where decisions get made, where new research methodologies are shared, but the people are left out of this conversation, and they are feeling these feelings they keep to themselves. So by sharing something through art, we enhance the audience of it, and we enhance the narrative, and we give people words to kind of articulate the problem, which empowers them.
Thank you,
yeah,
Jackie.
so,
you can just conclude, please.
Yes, thank you. And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for the tech difficulty. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it really is a shame, but that happens sometimes, as I said, I really encourage everyone to have a look at the video. Themba kindly put the link in the chat, and have a look at the work that Jackie is doing, because despite the tech difficulties, what is very clear to me is that it is a very innovative and different approach to really understanding people's relationship to justice, both the value of justice in their lives and the fairness, and the justice system and the institutions. So I think it's a very different perspective. It to me helps keep the perspective that data is not just about surveys and numbers, although that is of course an important part of it, but that if you really want to understand people's experiences, that there's a whole range of tools that can be used to also tap in, as you said, into those different layers. So I encourage everyone to please have a look at Jackie's website and work, and the link we said. We did get the poll results. I hadn't realized how little time there was to answer. So many of you did not have a chance to answer, but I do think there is general agreement that different ways of collecting qualitative and quantitative data to understand the justice problems and people's justice journeys can complement each other. So with that, and I'm also looking at the time, I would like to move to our next speaker. We are traveling to Sierra Leone. And we have from Sierra Leone, Mr. Shahid Korji, who is the Justice Sector, Justice Sector Coordinator, head of the Justice Sector Coordination Office in Sierra Leone. We're very happy to have you with us, Shahid. You will speak to us about measuring access to justice in your country and some experiences. You have the floor.
I thank you so much, Micah. I think I'm going to attempt to save myself from the technological thing. So, Themba, can you kindly share my presentation? I'm going to run through a PowerPoint presentation, please. Themba? Right, so here we go. I'm going to be speaking on measuring access to justice in Sierra Leone. My name is Shahid Mustafa Korji, Coordinator of Justice Sector Coordination Office. Even before I get started, I actually want to extend my gratitude to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. They've actually supported a lot of initiatives in improving access to justice in Sierra Leone. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Themba. Right, so my presentation will take the following format. I'll talk briefly because it's going to be focused on the VNR, the Voluntary National Review. So I'll speak a little bit on the 2019 VNR. We are a third time at VNR. We'll speak about the data collection process, the assessments, and then the key indicators or accelerators of our national development, which are Goal 4 and Goal 16. Obviously, the focus is on Goal 16. And then we'll briefly run through the findings, the beneficiaries of legal aid services, legal representation, and up to the deployment of the magistrates and judges. So we'll be looking at the informal justice mechanisms and a little bit of the formal justice mechanisms. And then we'll run through the challenges, the lessons, conclusion, and then the next steps. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay. So as I mentioned in my introduction, sorry, Themba, the previous slide. So we are a third-timer VNR presenter. We did in 2016, 19, and 2021. So for 2019, our focus was actually on two goals, education, Goal 4, and Goal 16, access to justice. And these SDGs are basically tied to our National Development Plan, and then the Justice Sector Reform Strategy, which is a 5-year strategic document. And for especially the last two VNRs that we worked on, the 2019 and 2021, the focus has been on the principle of leaving no one behind. And we are aware that in the implementation of the SDGs, we have been challenged by COVID-19 pandemic. Next, please. Next slide, please, Themba. So in terms of the assessments, I'll quickly run through the institutions that are responsible for collecting data. At the center there, you can see the data collectors. For us, the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development is the focal point for reporting on Goal 16 nationally and internationally. The Office of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice is primarily responsible for Goal 16, and my office has been supervised, which is the Justice Sector Coordination Office, by the Office of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, so is the Legal Aid Board. And then, yes, so we have the national statistics, obviously, that's contributed, and then the Ministry of Education is there as because of Goal 4. Next, please. So in terms of the assessment, our focus was on two indicators. for this year, for 2021, as we did in 2019. So we looked at goal 4, which is education goal 16, but primarily on goal 16, access to justice. So our focus was really on gauging testimonies. So we had to basically look at the policy interventions that we promised in 2019 to the UN that we are going to deliver on goal 16 for 2021. We focused on those policy initiatives to gauge the testimonies of those that may have benefited from those things that we promised that we were going to deliver. So we undertook a rapid impact assessment of the government legal aid service in 16 districts in Sierra Leone, where basically we gauged the welfare effects of beneficiaries of intervention, especially the less privileged. And then we also assessed legal assistance from the free legal aid representation to the application of alternative dispute resolutions. Next, please. So on the findings, we basically, in terms of who are the people that have benefited from legal aid services, if you understand the context of Sierra Leone, 80% of justice is accessed through the informal justice mechanism. So we have the local court system running justice programs, unlike the formal justice mechanism, which would attribute to like 20% of people. So in the survey that we did, about a total of 153 respondents were interviewed, of which 99 were people who consider as marginalized or very poor. So this year, the focus was really on gauging the justice needs of those people, and then looking at those policy initiatives that we promised. And then out of the 99 beneficiaries, out of the 98, 99 of the beneficiaries received free legal assistance. So in general, in total, more than 4,000 people have benefited from legal assistance in Sierra Leone, and this has been done through the Legal Aid Board. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so now this is just a breakdown. I've just referenced that up to 400,000 people have benefited from legal aid services. And then in terms of the breakdown of the 4,000, now we talk about the legal representation. So the Legal Aid Board was established, between 2015 to 2020, about 86,000 people have benefited from legal representation. So talking about those that cannot really afford lawyers. These are the breakdown of the figures. I'll not go through. In 2020, about 9,558 males and 1,400 females and juveniles have all benefited of being represented in courts by the legal aid services that we provide. Next, please. Next slide, please, Tima. So we also provide legal aid and mediation. A total of 84,000 have benefited from legal aid and mediation. And our legal aid service actually handles civil matters, spouse maintenance, labor matters, and right through to minor criminal matters. And our legal aid service is structured to reduce the pressure on the already overstretched police and the general force. So it's basically moving towards people-centered primary justice service and then moving away from the formal justice system. Because get to think about it, 80% of our justice system is through the informal justice mechanism. Next, please. So parts of, again, moving away from now the informal justice mechanisms being provided by the legal aid service, there's also the aspect of the formal justice mechanisms. In Sierra Leone, there has been a huge deployment of magistrates and judges in every district in Sierra Leone. So in 2021, this year, 34 magistrates and 43 judges have been deployed in rural districts compared to 27 in 2019, magistrates and 32 judges in 2019. So since our VNR presentation in 2019, we've increased on the number of magistrates and judges deployed in rural places in Sierra Leone. And for the very first time, actually, we've had judges deployed in places that have never seen a judge. And what we did in those instances were to send out paralegals or data collectors to assess the impact of having those magistrates and judges or state council in those remote places, and then taking testimonies of those that may have benefited from those deployments. Next, please. So now I'll go through the challenges. I think this may not be unique to Sierra Leone. It may cut across developing countries because of the way Sierra Leone is structured. There is actually a challenge when you think about the COVID, and then it's really difficult to link people when you want to undertake such survey. Our mobile system or network is still not very much advanced, so coverage was a huge challenge. And then we have CSOs and NGOs that do support our SDG 16 drive. So some would have to improve in terms of their technical and financial resources to further contribute to national development. Next, please. The key lessons that we learned: one, VNR would usually begin a bit late, so we're hoping that future VNRs will start a bit earlier. And then there's a need for a collaboration in our VNR delivery. There's a need to have more institutions collaborate. And then there is also a need for a sustained digital solutions across the board. I mean, when you think about it, we now have the COVID, and COVID has exposed us to new ways of doing things. So there has to be a way of positioning ourselves in terms of improving technology if we want to address some of the justice needs of our people. Next, please. And of course, there has to be resources allocated both from the national budget and from development partners in supporting Goal 16. I'll conclude by mentioning that Sierra Leone is a third-timer VNR presenter. We did in 2019 and 2021, and our focus are on two key goals: education and Goal 16. For Goal 16, our data collection process involves government institutions, parliamentarians, local councils. We also use the media and development partners. We use the multi-level secondary and primary information to generate data. And then the data and consultations reveal that Sierra Leone has made significant strides towards achieving Goal 16 targets and also Goal 4, because 20% of our budget is allocated on education, as we have the free quality education. And then Goal 16 as well, we've done quite a lot of institutional work to strengthen our institutions. And to a very large extent, we are really supported by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to set up an M&E framework and also develop policy guidelines for reporting on Goal 16. Maybe let's see what slide come up next, Timba, if there's any. All right, so the next steps. What are the
quickly, Shahid, please.
So we're hoping that there will be a post-VNR stakeholder consultation. We'll continue this. We'll discuss with institutions in terms of how, we'll continue our engagement in terms of how do we move SDG implementation forward. And then we'll also be working to support the technical working groups that have been established to support VNR processes. I thank you so much, Mayaka and the rest of the team.
Thank you so much, Shahid. Thank you for sharing this this experience. And I think it's interesting to see how this process of voluntary national reporting, which was created by the SDGs, by the 2030 agenda in the UN, that it really can drive at a national level if those connections are made properly. It really can drive a different way of collecting data and assessing progress to those goals. And it's also interesting, I think, to see that you in Sierra Leone did a combination of survey and data results with some testimonies and listening to people's experiences. So thank you for sharing those experiences. I think that's fascinating. You also mentioned, of course, the challenges of data gathering during COVID, which I think we could have a whole session, if not a whole day, on, because that is something I think in every country in the world that has posed a challenge. But I think you managed to report despite those challenges. So compliments for that, and we look forward to working with you on these issues in the future. Now, without further ado, I would like to go take you all to Colombia, where Daniel Gomez Gaviria, who is the Deputy Director of the National Planning Department, is ready to share some of their experiences with the legal needs survey in Colombia. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Knowledge Platform for Security and Rule of Law for the invitation and for organizing this session. I think our technical team will help me project. Thank you very much. Let's go to the next slide. So in this presentation, I'd like to share with you the main results of the legal needs survey in Colombia. And especially, I'd like to focus on the granularity of the survey that allows us to understand asymmetries in the resolution of legal needs and how different types of characteristics of demographics, of regional characteristics. Let's go back. I'll let you know when to go forward. Thank you. I'll try to emphasize in the presentation the disparities in terms of all these different characteristics and show and share how things like conflict resolution according to legal needs change by types of citizen, how different routes of action are implemented, what are the different types of barriers to legal needs resolution. Next, please. So the main takeaways of the presentation will be first to highlight how legal problems in Colombia are very heterogeneous across regions, across people, but however, we do identify some main typologies of problems, including crime, health, and public services. Experiences facing the resolution of legal needs in Colombia is very heterogeneous across gender, across rural and urban areas, across even within the cities. Action routes, so how do people try to solve these legal needs, to resolve these disputes, is also very varied. So some people go to institutional settings to solve their legal needs. Others resort to violent methods, and we'll see how and what can we learn from the survey in terms of the routes of resolution. Finally, 19% of needs were met. So this is unfortunately a very low number still, but we truly believe that with these types of data, we will be able to fine-tune public policy and legal offer in Colombia to really meet this heterogeneous demand and challenges that people face to meet their legal needs. Next. So let me briefly explain what's the conceptual framework behind the survey. The survey is a sample of 40,000 households, 129 individuals in 13 main Colombian cities, urban, rural, and nationwide. So we have a different representativeness across different types of regions. The conceptual framework leads us to talk about justice problems and their relation to access to justice. It identifies that it's not enough to just identify the problems individuals face. It's very important to also include structural barriers, legal empowerment, justice offer readiness, material conditions such as means of transportation, income, all the different factors that are involved in accessing legal services. So some initial definitions that are important. First, a justice problem, a legal problem, arises from disagreements, disputes, conflicts, also from the environment in which individuals interact. While a legal need involves at least 3 conditions. So legal needs are the main subject of analysis in the survey, and legal needs require both external and environmental conditions that affect individual rights or impair quality of life. It involves a dispute, conflict, or disagreement between individuals that impair their quality of life and their rights. And finally, it requires intervention by a third party to solve the problem. So that's our definition of a legal need, which mediated by access to justice will define met and unmet legal needs. Next, please. So in terms of overall results and what type of data we're talking about, the survey allows us to collect information on declared problems, 8.2 million declared problems, but not all of them are fully characterized. So out of these, 99.2% were fully characterized. And of these 8.2, 79% were able to be linked to an action route to try to solve that problem. And that leads to 6.4 million that are identified as legal needs. So the results that I will be presenting in what follows refer to these 6.4 million identified legal needs and their reporters, which are 5.2 million Colombians. Next. So what do these legal needs look like? We have different categories ranging from land, education, armed conflict, housing, consumption, family, crime, health. The most frequently reported legal needs in Colombia are related to crime, health, and public services. Of these, some are very concentrated in a few of these typologies. In crime, for instance, 87% are related to theft, fraud, extortion. A lot of the reporters report at least two legal needs simultaneously. So there is a concurrence of legal needs that occur across different categories. 39% report at least two, and the main concurrence are listed here between health, public services, housing, public services, work and family, discrimination and health, state and armed conflict, and debt and health. So health is very much present across all these typologies and are linked with other legal needs. About impact, and this is very interesting, the survey allows us to also identify subjective impact reported by individuals facing different legal needs. And here, the frequency of the legal needs reported don't necessarily correspond with the subjective impact. So for instance, problems related to armed conflict are the least frequent, but they, and with land and armed conflict are the least frequent, but they are the ones that reportedly affect people the most. And we also are able to identify which type of problems with access to justice are those that generate the most subjective impact. I'll go into that later, but it's very interesting to see how paperwork, bureaucratic impediments to access to justice have a very high subjective impact. So I think that this shows just how frustration with the system is very, very much linked with how much people are affected by these unmet legal needs. Next. So here I want to start looking into the asymmetries. So the main topic of the session, we are able to analyze, for instance, subjective impact by gender. This should be gender, not sex, actually. But what we see is the gender differences. The differences are associated with gaps in unmet and reported legal needs. Women face the largest gap associated with family problems, which are also those that affect women subjectively the most. On the other hand, problems that affect women more than men are mainly those associated with environmental aspects and discrimination. So there's still gender bias seems to be an important issue in terms of legal needs. Next, in terms of regional disparities, we find important differences also across urban and rural households. The largest differences across these categories are identified for health-related problems. Average declaration in rural areas is 13.1%, while the average declaration in cities is only 10.6%. Subjective impact in rural areas is also higher for at least 6 of all our categories. In environment, discrimination, we see the largest gaps between cities and rural areas. The largest differences are identified also in terms of environmental impact. So here we start getting a lot of important information for public policy and for policy design in terms of lots of different areas of public policy, right? In terms of employment, in terms of health systems, in terms of environmental policy. So the richness of this data goes beyond just the legal sector and the legal system, but it also goes across, feeds across many other areas of public policy. The last element in regional differences relates to the differences across main cities. So the differences are not only across urban and rural areas, but also between the 13 main cities in Colombia. We see that differences are also very big. Cali in the south of Colombia is very different from Pasto, also in the south, but very different in turn with Cartagena on the Caribbean. And these differences are also valuable inputs for local governments to address the needs of their citizens. Next, please. In terms of action plans, we find that 56% of individuals did nothing to solve their legal problems, right? So a very important question is, why did they do nothing? No, it could be because if we do start from a rational agent paradigm, which I think is very useful, we do have to think about what are the costs, both subjective and monetary, that people face in accessing these different routes of problem resolution. And if they do not access them, it's very likely that some element of these costs are greater than the benefits that they perceive from going ahead with this action plan. And the choice between the different action paths will also reflect on these differences between costs and benefits of each choice. 43% of respondents turned to an institutional solution. So this includes government, but also private individuals and civil society type of resolutions. And 0.9%, almost 1% of respondents took illegal or violent means to address their problems. I always worry about underreporting of this 1% of the illegal and violent actions, but it's still very interesting to see that there are people that in the survey report that they took some illegal action to solve their legal needs. Next, please.
Daniel, can I remind you of the time, please?
Yes, I'm almost done. So in terms of the routes of action, so the institutional route is mainly driven by relevance and trust. The routes of violent action are fed by anger, by getting carried away. They report that the other person deserved what was coming, so vengeance. So here also socio emotional skills seem to be a very important element to solve legal needs. Perceived effectiveness and trust with institutions lead the illegal actor route, and inaction as well. Inaction is about importance and worthiness of going into the struggle. Next, please. So in terms of legal needs and satisfaction, I also mentioned this before, but very interesting to see that to identify how problems dealt with, problems not dealt with because of paperwork, time, are very much linked to a high impact, subjective impact. 19.8% of reporters report satisfied legal needs, 80.2 are unmet legal needs, 17.3 of satisfaction per person on average, and average dissatisfaction is 82.7. And let's go to the final slide, and I'll close there. So lots of work ahead for us in terms of formulating public policy. We construct in Colombia a national development plan every 4 years with the new government. We have elections coming up next year. So this definitely will be a very valuable input for the construction of the national development plan across many areas. Next round of the survey in 2022, we've been working with the Ministry of Justice, DANE, in the survey, together with the OECD as well. New estimation methodologies. We are implementing new inference methodologies to be able to especially identify regional asymmetries. And finally, we want to preserve and be very careful with the independence of the legal needs survey. And that's something that we need to consolidate it together with the DANE and our statistics offices in Colombia. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daniel. That was fascinating. And that last point indeed really links it also to the transformation of the justice system, because the moment we start translating the data into change and transformation, it does become a political topic and can be a topic for contestation. So that independence is certainly important. I also really liked how you showed how you actually showed us on the basis of the data those asymmetries. They became very visual, and I think that is critical. Of course, we don't have time to go into all the details here to really understand the situation in Colombia, but I think it's fascinating to see how you can use the data that you've collected to really make those asymmetries visible. And lastly, how you connected the sort of the hard part of the data, what the problems people have and the routes they choose, to also the emotions and the experience that people have with that, because we saw from your data 56% of the people do nothing, but it doesn't mean that the problem is gone or that it just suddenly ceases to exist. The injustice is often still there, the frustrations build, and that of course has a very, very strong impact on people's trust and on the broader how people experience fairness in their societies. So we are behind schedule. We had some technical issues, of course. So rather than go back to all the panelists, I have asked Tatiana to just share some of her reflections. That is Tatiana Teplova of the OECD, who has kindly agreed also to join us. So we will go to her reflections on these different experiences and some of the work that OECD has been doing at the international level. And then finally, we will move to Sam Muller for some concluding remarks. Sam Muller of Hill, that is. So a slight change in the program, but with that, I hope we can still conclude within the time frame. So with that, Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maaike, and of course it's a great pleasure for the OECD to be here as part of this really important event. And I also would like to take indeed this opportunity to thank the Pathfinders for the great partnership, but also for inviting the OECD to be part of this important conference, but also the government of the Netherlands for its leadership on this crucial topic. It's been really inspiring to hear the experiences from Sierra Leone and Colombia in strengthening their national measurement frameworks for access to justice. Also, what was interesting as part of the VNR process, and then of course the crucial, but also I found really powerful perspective on the importance of narratives, which was brought forward by Jackie from South Africa. And here I'd like to maybe briefly make 3 general points, maybe building on each respective presentation, but then also linking back to the OECD work. First is that, of course, justice data is not just about numbers. It is about people and their experiences and their feelings and ultimately trust and confidence that they have in justice institutions, but then also democracies and kind of countries around the world more broadly. And this has been highlighted really clearly by Jacques' presentation, but then also the keynote speech by Ms. Schumann. And from the OECD perspective, we see that better collection and use of justice data can indeed help identify the most prevalent and most serious justice problems, and indeed pinpoint where and how these problems take place. It can also help reveal which justice services are most relevant in responding to those problems, but also by measuring what works in the delivery of those services, but also for whom and under what circumstances, in order to learn and adapt. And in that way, data indeed can enable more efficient design of interventions and strategies and guide optimal resource allocation. And we've heard excellent examples from Colombia on how this can be done in different areas of public policy. And here indeed one can argue that justice and justice data can serve as a guiding beacon to develop policies to close the justice gap, but also to indeed address the asymmetries in access to justice, which is again the primary theme of this event. The second point is that we need to look at different data sources to understand the full justice picture, and yes, the types of asymmetries that exist, as was also highlighted by the previous speakers. And here just to highlight that traditionally the majority of justice data collected around the world has been administrative data from formal justice institutions, and it again tends to represent the supply side of justice systems and often fails to capture the experiences of those who deal with their justice problems through different means. And here maybe to flag that the OECD, together with of course our partners, including the Pathfinders, but also many others, is promoting the use of comprehensive data strategies, which include legal needs surveys, as was done in Colombia, but also a growing number of countries in the process of conducting these legal needs surveys, and of course building on the experiences of many others in the field. And here just to flag that these surveys can reveal experiences of people who have justice problems, but also when and where they arise, their impacts and their costs, and also what might work in addressing those problems. And again, I feel that the Colombian experience was an excellent illustration of this point. And I'd like to mention that the SDG framework now also includes a new indicator, 16.3.3 on access to justice, which also builds on the data that come from legal needs surveys. And here the OECD is a co-custodian together with UNDP and UNODC. We just held a 2-day workshop on supporting countries on how to actually measure and make progress under this indicator, of course, with the contribution of partners such as the HIL and World Justice Project and Pathfinders who participate here today. Maybe to also mention, to do due justice to different points that were raised during the presentations, is that it is important to think about justice data holistically and beyond also administrative data and legal needs surveys, including through user satisfaction surveys, journey mapping, or using different qualitative data or specialized studies to really kind of engage deeply with the particular vulnerable groups. And here I found, yes, the methodology used by Jackie really inspiring, and also connecting us to the real emotions of people and how they feel in connecting with the justice system. When it comes to data strategies, maybe just to mention that we, as part of the OECD data, we see that a growing number of countries are actually developing this comprehensive approach to data collection. But there is so much more that needs to be done, especially when it comes to this holistic approach of creating a full data ecosystem. And this data ecosystem should be including a full network of different justice stakeholders, of course, the judiciaries, but then also legal aid agencies, civil society, ministries of justice, justice, but then also many other line ministries, social ministries, health ministries, to really understand the overall picture. We should really look at the good practice examples, as was mentioned by Colombia, for instance, of connecting the dots between the Statistics Agency, DANE, but then also National Development Planning Agency and the Justice Ministry to come up with a comprehensive picture. And here maybe the last point, Mike, I know that we are
very, very quickly, because we only have a few minutes, and Sam has some thoughts to share.
To say that we should not overlook the importance of governance. These data strategies have to be underpinned by sound governance, including interoperability, including respect for privacy concerns, including data security, open data. So this is something that we as an international community, but also as individual countries should be continuously investing. So thank you for this opportunity and look forward to being in touch with all of you soon.
Thank you, Tatiana. I will pass the floor to Sam Muller for the last word, but before I won't come back. So I would like to thank all the panelists and everyone who has been here for their contributions. But Sam, over to you to close us all.
Very scary to be the last one to talk, but maybe just a few brief points. I feel a need to go back to the why. Why are we doing this? And for me, is transformation. We do not want change. I read somewhere, change makes something better. Transformation makes a better something. And we need a better something when it comes to justice systems. Whole delivering what they're supposed to deliver. We need them to deliver more prevention, more resolution, and to do that for more people. I think that's been the great revolution that we've all been led by Micah, David, the Pathfinders, you, Tatiana, and so many other of the friends I see here since 2019. And that is really and very important. And if we don't do that, the Secretary General is warning us. Our social contracts are at peril. Mariette said it, the social contracts are at peril. And it's also quite clear from your data, Tatiana, that our economies suffer. So good reasons to do something. The second part of the why I would just like to share with you is, okay, so what if we have data? What would that do? I mean, what can we then do if you have good data? And from the where I stand, I could see a number of approaches appearing that are getting more and more consensus. Tell us what we could do once we have that data. We need, and on the justice journeys, need to know more about what's working so that we could share that. And then we could use that, in my view, for two things. One is to strengthen existing systems. How can you make judges and lawyers in the traditional systems work a lot better? And secondly, to build new justice delivery mechanisms, because we know from the data, there is a huge segment of justice needs that are not being met and will probably never be met by the system of judges and lawyers. You need other justice out there. So that's one reason to do it. The second is that research shows everywhere that if we, what I call the justice marketplace or the enabling environment for these changes, if we don't change certain rules and regulations, if we don't allow more players on the justice delivery market, if we are a little less friendly to the monopoly of lawyers in delivering justice, if we don't open up that market and we create a space in which new things can happen, also politically, nothing's going to happen, and we're always going to be stuck with what we're doing now. And for that, you need data. And lastly, you need a movement. You need this global movement that is now slowly starting to emerge, of which we're all part, and which also I see slowly being created at the national level in different countries, which is absolutely great. But the foundation of data if without that foundation, data on the needs of people and the experiences they have, data on what works, you cannot do anything that is innovative to strengthen existing systems or to build new justice delivery mechanisms. It's very hard to create the business case for this enabling environment that we absolutely need. And it's very hard to create the movement that is absolutely necessary to make it happen. And I will end by saying our overarching inspiration should be, I think, climate. 20 years ago, nobody thought that climate was a problem. And now it is a problem. And one of the main reasons why we all unequivocally agree that it's a problem is because of the IPCC.
I have to interrupt. There will be another session on this channel. So we are a bit over time.
You caught me on time. I'm there.
Okay.
I just wanted to say two things, Micah, and that is to thank you and Themba this platform for putting it together, and thank and hugely support the Justice Action Coalition and what it's going to do, because I think that is really the way forward to help us bring these things together. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the speakers. It was great to have you. Obviously, more to discuss, so to be continued.